just about to start. Thought we'd give us a little bit of time to just get online, let everyone get online. But please, if you could let us know where you're from, put it in the chat, say hi. Remember that we've got the emojis or the reactions at the bottom. If you like what's being said, please let us know with a clap or something, and so that you can give us some feedback. And we welcome to everyone. I think we've got a bumper audience today. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I'm going to hand over now to our host for today, and that's Alex Hetherington. So thanks, everyone, and I will see you on the other side. Thanks. Cheers.
Yeah. Thank you, Carolyn. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. This is the first in the series of First Tuesdays, hosted by the ESG Exchange, with thanks to Fluid Rock Governance for the support in this particular webinar. I'm Alex Hetherington. I'm a long-time student of and consultant in corporate sustainability. I'm particularly excited about this topic that we are addressing this evening, focusing on ESG or sustainability, depending on the lexicon that you like to use, the leadership thereof, and particularly the leadership at board levels of companies and within the executive levels and structures of both public and private companies, and also, of course, state-owned enterprises as well. As I'm sure many of you are increasingly aware, this is becoming a hot topic. Media attention is being afforded to the issue around board expertise around non-financial issues. Reporting frameworks like the soon-to-be released International Sustainability Standards Board is going to be asking information around board composition and board experience and ESG issues, and even initiatives such as the CDP, formerly the Carbon Disclosure Project, is now awarding points to companies that can disclose and prove board experience around climate change and carbon management. And the flip side of that is that they penalize those companies that can't. So I think it's a very topical issue. It's only growing in stature at the moment. The structure of this discussion is I will introduce the panelists, facilitate some questions, get the feedback from the panelists on their thinking about some of these issues, and then we will open up at maybe the last 20 or 15 minutes of the webinar to questions. We will try and cover as many questions as we possibly can. But we have agreed among us that if we do not cover all the questions and you would like to send a direct question to either of the panelists or to all of the panelists, please do so, facilitated through Carolyn at ESG Exchange, and we will forward it on to the panelists. And they have very kindly said that they will respond to these questions. So please feel very much included in this discussion. Joining us to talk about these trends in corporate board and executive leadership and the value or otherwise of such expertise are three panelists that I don't think could be better positioned to actually be giving us their perspective. Anna-Marie van der Merwe is Executive Chair of the Fluid Rock Governance Group in South Africa. They provide legal, compliance, and governance support to companies. Anna-Marie is a corporate lawyer by training, has been a company secretary, and serves as a non-executive director on listed companies. She was a full member of the King Committee from 2007 to 2020, and a member of the King 4 corporate governance production team. Mary Adams, based in Boston in the USA, is a co-founder of Insight 7, a software company dedicated to integrating sustainability data with financial information to aid better decision-making by corporates. Formerly a high-risk lender with Citicorp and Sanwa, Mary is now a specialist in long-term systems thinking for companies and is the co-author of Intangible Capital, Putting Knowledge to Work in the 21st Century Organization. Importantly, she is also the co-founder of the Exit Planning Exchange, a forum for promoting long-term thinking in private companies, and also the Integrated Reporting US Community, a forum for promoting long-term systems thinking in public companies. Also with us is Dr. Sharon McPherson, who divides her time between the US and Africa, also a lawyer by training. Sharon was a Wall Street finance executive before becoming a co-founder and former CEO of Women in Infrastructure Development and Energy, Africa's largest women infrastructure investment group. An advocate for disruptive technologies, Sharon today is the CEO of a climate technology startup company, the Green Jobs Machine. She also serves as a non-executive director on numerous boards and is a member of the South African Institute of Directors and the National Association for Corporate Directors in the US. So I'd like to welcome all three of you to the panel. Thank you very much for joining us. We're looking forward to this. I'm going to kickstart the discussion with a question to you, Anna-Marie. And it really comes out of what I think might be termed contradictory findings around the value of board expertise around ESG issues. In 2019, PwC issued a survey, the results of a survey of 700 directors of publicly listed companies. 56% of these respondees thought that boards back in 2019 were spending too much time on sustainability. In other words, it was a distraction, I think is reading between the lines. A more recent survey by the Boston Consulting Group and INSEAD that was published in 2022, also surveying board directors, came up with findings where 70% of such directors felt that ESG expertise at the board level was both ineffective and unable to integrate proper governance and strategy within the corporate sector. So, Anna-Marie, I just want to ask you a question straight up. Is there tension within boardrooms and within executive office structures around around the value that ESG brings to companies and why they should be focusing on these kinds of issues these days?
Thanks, Alex. Afternoon, and let me just say welcome, and on behalf of the FlirtRock Governance Group, also welcome everybody and my two co-panelists. I'm honored to be part of this panel with two well-experienced people, so I think I'm going to learn from them as well. So, but let me try and respond to your question very quickly. I think, you know, Alex, I would probably respond on that from a very practical perspective, because when I talk to directors, I always make the point that it's not my legal background to talk to them about their role and their duties. It's the scars I have on my back, having grown up in boardrooms for 6 years, you know. So I may turn out to be the most cynical of the three panel members, to be quite honest, because I do see a lot of window dressing. I see a lot of lip service. I see a lot of tick box approach. And I think it talks to the point that you're raising, that there is a lot of gray areas. There's a lot of uncertainty. We are not on the same page around this. And for me, it was like, if you look at the topic, you would say, why are we having this conversation? This is a no-brainer. You know, I mean, why do we have to even talk about whether there should be ESG expertise? You know, I would think it's a given kind of thing. But then just now on the 31st of January, for example, here in South Africa, on one of our news platforms, Daily Maverick, somebody wrote an article about the ESG, what he called the ESG con. He used words like the ESG circus, the ESG fad, and they wrote quite a kind of hard, as you can gather, a string kind of approach to this whole thing about ESG investing and what a circus it is. And then somebody responded to his article, and I heard her words were something, I'm horrified to read this nonsense. So it's emotional. It's emotional. People get quite worked up about this. But to me, practically, I think it's not about these boxes. It's not about E and S and G. It's about the way we do business. It's about being ethical, responsible capitalists. You know, I'm concerned that we put these labels on it, and what happens, unfortunately, as the gentleman points out in his article, you have people who see that as an opportunity to make money. So you're back, now you get all these people into the boardroom, and that puts certain board members, no, this is just another money spinning kind of, topic that will blow over. Kind of thing it's the flavor of the month or the week or maybe the year, but I doubt whether it's for the decade or the century. So I do think we shoot ourselves in the foot in the sense that we have not come to terms and agreed as to what is ESG, what does it mean in the context of our companies. We don't talk about it. We assume we know all of this, and I think that to me is probably the one area where we as boards need to really kind of step up and decide how we're going to do this. But I'll continue. I'll continue the entire evening. So let me stop there and throw it back to you and the other panelists.
Okay, no, thanks, Anna Marie. I mean, I would just venture that perhaps one of the reasons that there is still resistance being expressed might actually come from a area of fear or lack of knowledge. It might be defensive. I'm not sure. So, Mary, I'd love to hear your viewpoints from the States, from the US. I mean, we're seeing the SEC now talking about the requirements for climate change reporting potentially becoming mandatory for listed companies. There is movements. One could possibly argue that over the last 5 to 10 years, the US has been behind the curve. It's certainly behind Europe in terms of adoption and integration of ESG and non-financial issues into corporate activity. What are you seeing there at the moment, and what are your experiences?
Well, of course, I don't think there's a universal reaction by any means, right? And we have some very outspoken political leaders who have chosen to grab onto this as another way to divide and muddy the waters, if you will. But I think one of the things that's challenging about this is that there are 3 different drivers behind the ESG movement, and I think each sometimes gets misunderstood. Clearly it started out as a values-led movement that people that saw and wanted to change the world started a long time ago focusing on this. And that's still a very important thing. And as Anna Marie said, that's where we all need to be based, right? Is to know what our purpose is and how we can make a difference in the world. However, there are 2 other things that have happened. The second is that beyond values, that now it's become a question of value. So the markets are understanding that there are risks that cannot be diversified away. And so in the US, it's really the markets, especially the investor community that's leading this. And they're just knowing that they don't have a choice because financially they're putting themselves at risk. And that's why I think you see all the, SASB was a very successful effort that came out of the US that's now being rolled into this Financial Standards Board. So, the focus on value and metrics is very important. So then the third driver is innovation. And we live at a moment of incredible change, right? The changing risk factors, but also incredible opportunities. And so almost every ESG factor is also, is a risk, but it's also a driver for innovation. And I think that's what's so exciting about this, is that there's this possibility that there will be incredible change and incredible value created in the coming decades. And so we have to think kind of from all 3 perspectives.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I mean, I would also add to that I think your focus there on value probably directly translates into financial sense. These risks and opportunities are perhaps starting to be seen on the financial bottom line of companies. So it's, the fiduciary duty of boards to be protecting that is what could arguably be driving this need for further expertise. But Sharon, let me bring you in here. You are on many boards. I know you also are, you chair various social and ethics subcommittees of boards for different companies. It's got to be a difficult place for companies to know exactly what kind of expertise they need at a board level. So how do you help a company navigate their way through that to ensure that they've got the right kind of expertise on there? And where do they find it? I think we might have you on mute there, Sharon.
Sorry about that.
Oh,
Loaded
no
questions. I think the short answer is very gingerly. It's not easy. I think Anna Marie and Mary would both agree. Before I get into the short answer of the question in terms of what I think needs to happen on boards in terms of where we find some of the expertise, because Alex, I think that the expertise is there. I think part of what we're going to have to do, I think, at the board level is, first of all, question the will. Do we have the will to really drive? And that circles back to, I think, points that both Mary and Anne-Marie talked about. And so I think coming back to some of the drivers for innovation, I think is going to be important. But I want to pick up on something else that you also alluded to earlier, as did a couple of the other panelists. This has been around for a long, long time. If you go back to 1890, even before, this idea that you are your brother's keeper and socially responsible investing, it's biblical stuff, it's Torah stuff, it's Quran stuff, right? I mean, this stuff goes back to 1890s Quakers, other people saying, hey, we got to be more responsible about how we invest. Right through to, the various UN conventions, to, BlackRock's CEO going, hey, I'm going to do something about it, and then, of course, now, as more recently in 2021, we have the United States and the US, we have the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, saying, we're going to get a task force on this. Yeah. And so I think, I mentioned that to say, if you go back and you look at the history, and some folks are saying in the chat, talking about the Japanese. So if you go back and you look at the history with respect to those folks who are engaged in either cheap politics, where they're willing to say anything for a vote, to folks who are just willfully ignorant for a whole host of other reasons, which may translate in some short-term gains for them. This ain't going nowhere. It's been around for a long time, and it's here to stay. So I wanted to just put that out there and stir the pot. And there'll be lots of people who may disagree. Bring it on, and we can have that conversation. So what do I think in terms of like the talent that's needed on the board? I think part of the challenge that we've had on boards is that ESG, which really it originates in this whole idea of socially responsible investing. And then we dropped the social and it became responsible investing, right? And then it became something else, and then it became something else. And so the consultants notwithstanding, and all the folks who are interested in commoditizing ESG for their own personal gains, let's put that to the side for a second. And let's look at like what happened on boards. And then the boards got, they got a whiff of some shareholder action in some cases and thought, we better do something. And they dug into the G in ESG. Yeah. And then the E and the S have still been on walkabout. Yeah. Right. For a long time. And so I think some of the skill that we've got to bring and that we got to dig into, I don't think we have to find it. I think it's on the board, but I think we've got to have the will to really dig into it, is to say, okay, we've been focused on the governance. What's going to happen with the E and the S? And the last thing I'm going to say is that I think we've got to bring together folks who can move beyond the tactical, because I think too many boards are tactical, to the strategic thinking around how do you embed this in the communities in which we operate, because I think that some of the drivers of the innovation will continue to be climate and some of the other big things that disrupt us and cause us to lose sleep. But if we stop doing all the things that we've been doing, we're still going to have, according to climate scientists, we're still going to have decades of disruption, in our environment that's going to require that we think differently about the communities in which we operate, and that requires systems thinking. So if there was one skill, I would say board members who have the capacity to do their jobs properly, not just be tactical, be strategic, and be systems thinkers about this.
Okay, thank you. I want to pick up on one point you said there, though, about the focus on climate as being a key driver within boards at the moment. I was listening to a discussion earlier today around coming out of the biodiversity discussions at the end of last year in Montreal, where there was tremendous awareness and I think promotion of the fact that climate is actually a subset of biodiversity. So we have from an environmental perspective, we actually have a much wider responsibility to be looking at nature in all its facets, and climate is part of that. But it does seem to me, and I'm going to open this to all of you, just out of interest, it seems to me that that climate is driving the agenda. That's what's got everyone concerned. Maybe it's because of some of the weather events that we've experienced. But from the E perspective, it can't just be climate, right? It has to be much wider than that. So Sharon, back to you on that, and then I'd love to hear Mary and Anna Marie's perspective on that.
Listen, we could spend a long time talking about the environment and how do we define the environment. I will say this. I'll kick the can and I'll hand it over to Anna Marie and to Mary. I want to talk deeper about the S as well, because I want to come back to the idea of community-centric data and how increasingly rating agencies, the Prudential Authority, if we're talking about South Africa, and it doesn't matter in which jurisdiction you're operating, you don't have to be an insurance or regulated industry. I do agree with Mary, the financial services sector, we're on to this and we drive a lot of things in the real economy. So, we're going to keep heading down this path. I think how we define the environment, in my mind, is critical. And I think that the environment is much broader than environment with the little e. Go out and do your EIA. I think the environment has to take into consideration the community and the broader context in which we're operating. And that's one of the reasons why I say I think systems thinking and the capacity to handle complexity. We're lazy. We don't want to handle complex, especially in financial services. We're like, I want to tick these boxes, get on with it, and then I want to go play golf. And this is more complex than that. So I think that the complexity in analyzing the environment is one of the big challenges that we have. So I'll kick that can over to my colleagues.
Okay, no, thanks. I mean, in many instances, I actually have sympathy for companies in terms of their need to start to tackle the complexity of this. It's been forced on them in recent times, kind of complexity that they perhaps haven't been forced to address beforehand, and it's tough. The reporting side, just from a compliance perspective, is tough, let alone actually pushing that into strategic thinking and understanding the systems is a different story. But Anna Marie, I'd like to ask you, we've got the E, we've got the S, and we've got the G. Where do you think companies need to be placing their attention at the moment? Is that an unfair question because it actually is dependent on jurisdictions in which they operate or sectors in which they operate? But yeah, let me hear your thoughts on that because it is so broad.
Alex, if I can, just very quickly, I think after listening to Sharon, I want to withdraw my earlier statement. I may not be the most cynical member of the panel. I'm now thinking about that, but I like where she's going. I think Lucia and I are, we're very much on the same page on this. And Sharon, your point about, the kind of, if this being biblical made me sort of think about recently, one of the most recent corporate governance codes that were published was of the Lesotho. And the Lesotho Corporate Governance Code is based on the teachings of Chief Mashlomi. And Chief Mashlomi, who lived in like 1720 to 1815, I kind of to explain who he was, I say he was the John Maxwell of his time, you know, kind of person, leadership guru, and all the princes of the tribes were sent to his school. He was the author of the Ubuntu principle about, you know, the villagers looking after one another, etc. So to your point, it's always been there, and that's for me the thing. This is not it's not a new box, a new label, a new division. It is who we are. It should be our DNA. And that, Alex, sort of brings me to your point as well. We need to be very careful not to kind of put it into boxes as well. You know, just this week I was in a conversation with the chair of a board, and we were talking about the matrix. What do we need in the board? And somebody made the point about environment. I said, no, I just don't want one of those greenies in my boardroom now, you know, kind of thing. And that's the concern, because this is how it is seen. For me also, if you think about, because that's really our topic today was about ESG and the board. If you think about what is the role of a board, and John has sort of touched on that already. You know, I read an article once, we do board evaluation, all those sorts of things. I read up a lot about that and the role of the board. And in this one article, because let's face it as well, let's not be honest here, you know, it's not, you know, no holy cows here. Management, in 99% of the cases, the board, in my experience, is a major source of frustration and irritation, you know, for management. You know, they could just get on with it if it wasn't for the board. And this one CEO, I thought, wow, I would love to meet this man, because he made the comment that his board, to him, is like having access to the best consultants money can buy. Like, wow, that's the kind of board member I want to be. I want my CEO to say, you know, I bring that value to the table. Now, what that makeup, that body of consultants should look like, I think that question needs to be answered by, first of all, what is our purpose? Why do we exist? What are the material critical issues in our business? If you take Sharon, financial services, etc., they're not necessarily, and I'm not, you know, this is again, but not necessarily on the environmental side, the social side, I think is critical, but it depends from organization to organization. For me, the board should not go, is it E, is it S, is it G? The board should go, who are we? What are our values? And how do we ensure that our values, to Mary's point, are embedded in everything we do? And if you look at the role of the board of that consultant, that strategic kind of leadership, culture, strategy of the organization, how do we make sure that we live those values in everything? Let me give over to Mary, maybe, or to yourself.
Yeah, Mary, I've got a specific question for you, but I mean, is there any response that you'd like to come in on what has been discussed to this point?
Yes, I'd love to comment, especially on the systems thinking that Sharon introduced. I think that board members are no different from all business people, that we were brought up with a set of mental models. I mean, if you look at education, specifically business education today, so much of it is really still based on an industrial model, and we're all trying to adapt to new ways of thinking, and we're hamstrung. And so I think one of the most fundamental things that a light bulb went on for me not too long ago, if you think about how does a company see itself as a system, and what are the tools for doing that? And you think about what are the tools today. First, you have an org chart, and that tells you how people work together, or what their assigned roles are, but it doesn't really explain how things get done. A second way of, the second big tool that most people have for seeing an entire company is the chart of accounts in finance.
Yes.
So that tells you where the dollars go. The org chart tells you the people, but how does the company create value? What are different teams doing? How do they support each other? How are they connected to external resources? how is money and value creation flowing throughout an organization? That's a missing piece. And that's something that I've been doing a lot of work. Our company's been doing a lot of work to help create maps of value creation. And once you have that, then basically you can start thinking more systemically. It's, you know, it's not perfect, but that's the beauty of facing these challenges at this moment, is that we have technology to help us. And if you can map your value creation, then you can map resources, you can map spending, you can map workflows. And I also would submit, you know, I know that in South Africa, there's a very strong integrated reporting foundation, and the idea of capitals is a multi-capital model, I think, goes hand in hand with this, that if you think about how are we creating value today, performance for our customers, but in a way that's ensuring that we're taking care of our very broad environment, as Sharon said. How do we fit into the world? And so, you know, bottom line, we need to work on mental models to be able to facilitate that systems thinking on the board and throughout companies.
I hear you. I mean, one thing that I think it causes problems and perhaps a little bit of angst. We might be talking about the 6 different capitals, of course, of which one is financial, but I don't think for many people at both board and executive leadership positions, the dots have been clearly joined between these different capitals. And I think that's, I'm not quite sure why not. I'd like to hear your perspective on that. I'd like to hear your perspective on what needs to be done to actually join those dots.
So if you think very fundamentally, if you've got your model correct of the capitals, and I don't think that those are set in stone. I think that each company has to think about what are our capitals and put it into the language that fits for them. But if you're really, you know, our concept, you know, that I always talk about is sustainable value creation. So if you're going to create value today in a way that ensures that you have access and that you're taking care of the resources, you know, the environment that you live in, if you're going to pursue sustainable value creation, that means that every basically KPI and all of your financial metrics can be mapped to the capitals. And people haven't done it because it's hard, but it gets back to, if you can map value creation, then you can map resources, you can map capitals, you can map financials. So I think it's just coming to that systems view of a company is something we're all kind of, you know, there's been a lot of progress in thinking about it, but we're not, you know, it's certainly not mainstream yet.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Sharon, I'd like to come to you with your financial background. Let's talk about the investor community and what role they are playing in recent years around driving the need for ESG thinking and the need for ESG leadership within both the listed and the private space. Why are they doing it? I mean, if one was to take a really cynical viewpoint on it, and I use that word cynical in inverted commas, but you know, financial analysts are trained in analyzing a company's value through a set of financial statements, right? Typically, and those are typically backward looking. What ESG is demanding of companies now is to be forward looking, moving into a future unknown, whether it's a climatic future unknown or a social license to operate, greater corporate governance regulations coming down the board. We don't know exactly what these are looking like. So financial analysts actually aren't typically trained to be thinking forward like that. And yet we're seeing such movements around ESG investing, some of it good, some of it maybe lip service. we're looking at impact investing. But I think where the rubber really hits the road is where the good analysts are able to look at where the market is mispricing a company because of its ESG performance. And I'd like to hear your perspective on that, and how can boards and companies respond to that kind of interrogation?
I think that we are going to continue to see boards having to respond to shareholders who are having to respond to changes that are happening in the marketplace. So as a shareholder, I want to maximize the return on my investment, clearly, right? That's why I invest in the first place. And increasingly shareholders are saying, well, yeah, we want you to maximize the financial return on the investment, but that's not the only thing you have to do. And I want to link that back to climate. That's not the only thing that's going to continue to drive. And I like Mary's point around the technology, right? So we're going to keep, okay. Here is my theory. This is the world according to Sharon. Okay.
This is what we want.
This is my theory. There is literally a new economic paradigm that's emerging. And financial services is a key driver of this new, it's a major tenet or pillar of this new economic paradigm that's emerging, right? And so investors are going to continue to seek where they can get the most bang for their buck. And part of the challenge that I think we're going to continue to have is the tension between pushback from folks who say, hang on for a second, all this ESG stuff is giving me a heartache, and it is decreasing my short-term capacity to seek rent, seek profits.
Mm-hmm.
And those folks who are taking a more medium to long-term view to say, if you don't do this, you're not only going to lose your social license to operate, but you're not going to exist because you are failing to take into consideration a whole category of emerging risk, which are going to come back and bite you in the butt. So you're not smart, and we're not going to invest in you anymore. Sorry, bye-bye. And so there's that tension there. And what I'm saying is my money is on the folks who take a more medium to long-term view, because if you look at the ecosystem, there's no way for this to go but that way.
Yeah.
Because increasingly we're going to be under pressure if for no other reason we're going to continue to experience extreme weather events, and those kind of events that are going to keep shaving off hundreds of basis points off of your headline earnings. Folks are going to say, hang on, what are you doing about this? I want to come back to, and so what do boards need to do? Boards need to organize themselves so that the process of accountability that happens within whether it's the social ethics and transformation committee, which I've chaired in the past for various organizations, or wherever this is parked on your board, whatever the committee where it's parked. Too often what happens is you have meaningful discussions, and as board members, particularly non-execs, we try to hold management accountable for some things, particularly those of us who are able to see a little bit down the road.
Yep.
And the process of circling back and saying, well, hang on for a second, we asked for this, where is it? And we don't want to hear your funny stories. We want to hold you accountable for this. There's a lot of tension that starts to bubble up, and board members everywhere need to be willing to stick their necks out. That's why it's at the will. Having the skill is one thing, but if you don't exercise the will to hold people accountable, then it doesn't happen. And you don't need to be the green activist on the board. You just need to do your job properly, which means that you hold people accountable. And that is a question of will and not skill in many cases, in my opinion.
So can I ask a very blunt question to all three of you, and I'll go around one after the other. Your experience of being on boards, talking ESG or sustainability or non-financial issues, however it might be framed, are you getting taken seriously enough by the rest of the board? Are you being marginalized? Is there are you being encouraged by the fact that actually this is now becoming business critical and other board members recognize it as such? So Anna Marie, I'm going to start with you and then come around.
So, and Alex, if you allow me again, I just want to quickly, before I respond to your question, I just want to make another observation. So I was listening to the conversation around investors. Now, I must tell you, and I keep on wanting to write something about this, because this focus on shareholders and share price and investors is really annoying me. For me, I've got so many other stakeholders. You know, if you you know that we need. If you think about the statistic I read the other day, that in about 30 years from now, I think something like $30 trillion of wealth going to move from the baby boomers to the millennials. You know, who's got a new way of thinking about where they shop, who they want to be employed with, who they want to be suppliers to. You know, it's just like it's a no-brainer. But I think to answer then your question. It's there because I don't think anybody, or no, let me put the majority, I don't think, you know, with bad intent tried to sabotage this. I think it's more their views and very, you know, you quoted that some directors think we spend too much time on it. I think there's this misunderstanding again about what it is, what it literally means, why it is important for us, how it impacts the financial bottom line and our other bottom lines, our people bottom line, you know. So I don't think we're talking from the same mouth. And as I said, there's not really bad intent. It's just we come from different paradigms, different understandings about the role of the board. You know, I've been told once by a long-standing board member that you know, he does not expect me to ask so many questions as a new. I mean, you know, you get that kind of, you know.
I think that says a lot.
So it's not easy. I think we need to I say till I have my last breath. When I do training with board members, I always end with a little cartoon. And this cartoon, I think it was in a book, one of the books I recently read, Paul Pullman or Reimagining Capitalism, one of those books. But it's this gentleman sitting in this dark earth, barren ground, and he's got 3 little kids around the fire, and he says to them, yes, I know the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time we created a lot of value for shareholders. And you know, I see myself and 3 of my 4 grandchildren sitting there in a few decades from now. So yeah, I think we need to this fixation on investors and shareholders and what they want. I focus on the business, focus on your why, and then everything else, I believe, maybe naively so, will fall in place. But we need to get that conversation right in the board.
Thank you. Thanks. Mary, your thoughts?
So I don't sit on boards, I support boards. And I think, again, one of the huge challenges that I see is that, you know, the tools and the metrics that people are, and the way that people are thought to think about value creation has been pushed to the short term because financials were kind of the only source that people had. And as the balance sheet became less and less meaningless over the past decades, the only thing you had really to know how things were going was an income statement, you know, the bottom, you know, the financial bottom line. But a board has never been tasked with supporting short-term stock movements, although that is, you know, in practical terms, that's how many people came to understand shareholder value. So what I think our goal has to be to arm people with the tools and the knowledge. And so ESG metrics are, you know, you can debate whether it's the, you know, the right set of metrics, and is ESG the same thing as sustainability? You know, probably not, but it is bringing a new data set that's focusing more on that systems thinking, and so that's a really positive thing. And I don't think you can ignore it any longer. One of the things that was so compelling, and you know, your data about boards thinking they're spending too much time on this, that is pre-COVID, and I think the last few years, for a lot of reasons, have opened what we'll call, hardcore, old-fashioned business thinkers to the idea that, wow, there are some really significant risks out there, not only environmentally, but also socially. And it's a first step. That's not proactive thinking, it's reactive, but it's a first step in the right direction.
Okay, thanks. Sharon, what has your experience been on the boards that you serve?
Yeah, I like to answer that and go from theoretical to practical in terms of value creation and technology and data. I want to keep like stirring the pot and disagreeing with my panelists, but I love them and they are saying all these things that I'm just like really want to double down on. We talked about people. So here's your cheat sheet: people, processes, governance, technology, and data. So go away and think about those 5 things. And if you can get those things right, in terms of the right balance on the board and the right committee, then you're on your way. And so, no, the long answer to the question is, Alex, no. Most of the boards, especially the listed companies where I've sat on the boards, they do not. The companies where I've sat on the board of a few banks across the continent, where I've been able to get either a chair or a CEO who's really visionary and who's willing to say, okay, let's do this. What they've managed to do is make those links to value creation and build a business that's really resilient. And that's what I wanted to end on. I wanted to end on resilience. So I've actually stepped down from boards, and the only boards I sit on today are my own because I sold my tech startup. So prior to the pandemic, I started working with big insurance companies and hedge funds looking at resilience and vulnerability and looking at how you could take space technology, other kinds of technology, get data from a number of sources and begin to really drill down on emerging categories of risk and then connect that to your ESG spin. So you're making yourself more resilient. You're making your community in which you operate more resilient. You've got an ecosystem play. You're saving money because you're driving down your own vulnerabilities and you're helping all the people in your ecosystem. Now that's a win-win. Plus, on our platform, we're able to connect directly to your sustainable reporting framework. So a lot of the angst, the complexity, that, oh my God, I've got to do all this reporting when I just want to like sell insurance products. You take that out and then you show people a way that they can make. So then boards start paying attention. And then you're not kind of like the stepchild where you go through audit and risk and investment. And then you're like given like 5 minutes on the back end of the board pack to talk about all the things that, of course, now the Prudential Authority is going to come along and ask you a question. So yes, we like what's happening with the regulators because we think they're spot on and we need to be moving in that direction. And boards do need to give this. They are going to, because the pain is going to become so exquisite that they're going to have to. So.
Okay, thank you. Time is flying. Before I take some of the questions from our audience, I just want to open up to the 3 of you on the panel. Is there any other areas that you'd like to come in on that perhaps we didn't have enough time to cover? Any other points or thoughts from your side?
That's right.
Alex, if I can just, I saw a comment coming in about private companies and saying the focus is on listed entities. But to me, this is not a listed, non-listed conversation. It is a company societal conversation, whether you're listed or not listed. And whatever way, this is again to my point, the way you actually just say, what is our purpose as an organization? How do we live this purpose? That is what should drive this conversation. And let's try and steer away from ESG, because ESG is for listed company. It's not. It's being responsible business. We say, we're quite quick to say, doing good is good business, or we're responsible business. We don't really take time out to say, what does that look like? And how do we do it within our context? So I just want to make that point. We need to talk about this more. We need to talk about it in the boardrooms of all organizations and in the management, not only in the boardrooms, at all levels of our organization.
Okay. Mary?
I'll just say one thing that I think if there's one thing that I tell people that is a key kind of measure or indicator of whether you're walking the talk, it's whether your capital investment and your resource allocation process in your company considers more than just the financial. We're accustomed to thinking about financial and operational considerations and performance, and now you balance those two. Now you've got like a third ball. Now you're juggling, but you need to optimize all three: financial, operational, and sustainability, to be, as Sharon said so well, a resilient company.
Great, thank you. I just want to say we're getting at an unbelievable list of fantastic comments and questions coming in here on the chat box. I think the ESG exchange must capture all of these if we can, Carolyn, and hold it and distribute it out to all participants, because it's really been fantastic. One of the things that caught my eye was the issue of compensation. Is there a direct link between executive compensation, even board compensation, around a company's ESG performance? And if so, how should that be dealt with? I think, Anna Marie, I'm going to ask you that from a governance perspective first, but let's see what you all think about that.
I think it's a kind of, no-brainer that what you're going to incentivize is what you will get at the end of the day. So we need to look at that again, but doing it in a conscious, responsible manner as well. So there is a direct link. Absolutely believe it, and this is why this concept about aligning management's interest with shareholders' interest also concerns me sometimes. Yes, if it's a shareholder that's in it for a long run, by all means. It's a shareholder that's in it for quick return on his investment. I have a concern with that. So I want to say you need to incentivize along with the in alignment with the values and the purpose of the organization. That's what you should be driving. So yeah, I think that's a fairly straightforward.
Thank you. Mary and Sharon, have you got any thoughts around ESG links, KPI compensation?
Sharon?
Okay. Mary, you go first.
Sharon, were you going to go? Or?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Listen, I definitely agree with you, Anna Marie, that perhaps I'm a little bit more cynical. I'm probably older. That's also true. That must be why. I think I am a little more cynical though. And I have found that I can create omni-wins, and it sounds terrible, but I'm just gonna say it. I find that I can create omni-wins by like appealing to like the prurient interest, right? It's like, okay, you really don't care about anything else other than like doing what it is that you're producing widgets. That's really all you want to do. So if I show up and I assume that that's what you want to do, just, produce widgets, then I can drop a dashboard and I can connect. I can quantify. That's why data-driven practices is where we're going. If you look at where the Prudential Authority is going in South Africa, if you look at where the rating agencies are going, we are no longer going to be able to just have these policies and kind of do a razzle-dazzle show, and then it's in the integrated report, but you don't have the practices that back it up, right? So to Anna Marie's point, the S is going to have to include a multiplicity of stakeholders. So guys, we know it's coming. Just do it well, and then be out there ahead of the game, right? So if you drop a dashboard and you're able to show how engaging in these activities actually impacts your bottom line, and you link them back to someone's KPIs, then that's how you do it. Yeah. Every single day, you can look at what are the leading and lagging indicators? How am I doing? How does this, whether it's a new category of risk or some kind of reward that I'm after, this is not rocket science. The technology exists today for us to absolutely link. But the missing part of that is the link back to the financial performance. I think too often we are being perhaps too I don't know what the right word is I'm looking for, but I think if we just assume that, you know, the concern about the financial bottom line isn't going to go away, and that we should just focus on that and find ways to keep linking back to that and just go for it, that's going to help a lot of folks.
Mary, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I absolutely agree. I think, and that's the beauty today, that we can start connecting the dots. And as we get better at that, it will become more and more obvious what's important, how we can drive value. But if we always talk about them in silos, about ESG or sustainability over here and financial over here, we're never going to get to where we need to be, because you do need to be profitable as to survive as a company. So we have to learn to balance those considerations, but bringing in the long term. The one thing that I want to say that I think is important to remember is that to really drive change, you have to get that kind of integrated information down to the team level. What are the teams doing as part of that value creation system, and can they see the financial, the operational, the sustainability data side by side? It's absolutely possible. That's what we're focused on with our platform, but it becomes really magical if you give people that are closest to the problem the tools to solve the problem. And ultimately, that's what this is. ESG is bringing forward a whole new set of challenges that it's kind of up to us whether we turn them into opportunity.
Well, I think a very interesting question came in around the level to which a board can and should set the strategy of a company, and what oversight they have over the executive in order to drive that. And I think that might be touching on your point. If you trickle it down from the executive into other parts of the organization, Mary, you're actually saying that you know, within the employee workforce of the company, certain tools and understanding around ESG need to be provided. So I think that is something that has come up out of the discussion. I just want to ask her, we're kind of heading towards our last few minutes here. This drive towards ESG, there is a tension, and again, I picked it up in one of the questions here. We're talking a lot around linking it to the financial sustainability of the business, and of course that's understandable because most businesses rely on ecosystem services to some extent and to the communities in which they operate. But the issue around this ESG drive, is this in ways, and this is controversial, but let's give it a bash, is this a savior for capitalism as we've known it in the past? This is a very firm rebut to the business of businesses is profits, or whatever, sorry, I'll paraphrase that, but the Milton Friedman quote I'm getting at. Is this going to allow us to move into a new economic paradigm? Let me put that out to all three of you. Anna Marie, I'm going to start with you on that one.
I think if I can quote from Paul Polman's book on Net Positive, two things he says in there. First of all, we cannot have successful, financially healthy organizations in a society within poverty and with poverty and injustice and inequality. So that's the reality that we deal with. So we need to reimagine capitalism. We need to really look. But also, Paul says a very important thing. He says, profit is like oxygen. Okay, you cannot go without profit. But if you think that breathing is the only thing life is about, then you've got it wrong. And I think that's how I will respond to that point.
Thank you. Mary, how would you like to sign off on this?
I'm been the optimist on this call, so but I think it's a little hard to say that this will create a new kind of capitalism. I think as long as there's greed and humans involved, there will always be a tension. But what I do believe very firmly is that this is changing the mindset and the dogma of business away from the short term to thinking more long term, and that perhaps our environment today is demanding it, and perhaps we as business people are a little bit more aware and realizing that there is incredible value in resilience. And in, as always, capitalism adapts to opportunities, and man, there are a lot of opportunities. So,
Thank you. Sharon?
Yeah, listen, I think that the new economic paradigm that I referenced earlier, whether you look at people, profits, productivity, power, policy, all the pea soup stuff that I can give you, that's going to emerge no matter what. So, you know, there's no single person behind the curtain, like, you know, the wizard and the wizard or boss pulling the string. I mean, wish it was, because we could just go tackle that person and say, hey, what are you doing? We don't like that. Give us something new. And so there's a new economic paradigm that's emerging. I think the takeaway that I'd like to leave with folks is for you to go back and do some soul searching. Like, where are you in this new paradigm? Right? Where are you positioning yourself? And so I'm hearing you and Anna Marie, and the question that I think is percolating in my mind is, can the same kinds of capital that created one of the most unequal societies in the history of humankind, can those same levers be used to create a more just and equal society? What kind of world do we really want to live in? That's really the question that we need to be asking ourselves. You know, and am I, as a shareholder, willing to give up some of that financial profit for a more just and equitable society? We have to ask ourselves those questions as shareholders. And then the final thing I'll say is that there's been no society in the history of humankind that's been able to sustain itself with the levels of injustice and inequality that we have on the planet today. Every society that's been this most unequal has perished.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's be smart.
Okay.
Let's be smart. Yeah.
That is very thought-provoking final sentences. I'm extremely disappointed that our time is up. It's been such a wonderful discussion. Just looking at the feedback from the audience and the thanks from them to the panelists, all three of you, and your points of view. A very big thank you from the ESG Exchange. Wonderful discussion. Very much looking forward to being able to share the webinar to a wider audience, and also particularly the feedback from this particular audience, which has been really incredible. I thank the audience for all your points, and wish you all a fantastic morning, evening, good day, and thank you for a wonderful discussion, all three of you.
Alex,
Thank
thank
you.
you for hosting.
Thank you, Alex.
Very well.
Been
Thank
wonderful. Sorry, Anna Marie.
you. No, we're just also saying thanks to Alex. Thank you.
And thanks to all of you from the ESG Exchange. We are having this discussion again with a different topic on ESG investing. Is it just a fad? So that came up today. And so that's going to happen on the 7th of March. We are alternating the time, so it will be earlier, a couple of hours before now, so that we can bring in our Asia Pacific, Australia, Japan, Beijing, all our members from that side of the world. But thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And the comments will be anonymized and loaded to the events page, along with the questions and answers and a recording of the video. Please share it far and wide. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.